Good morning. My name is Tomasz, and I'm coming to you from a position of serious disadvantage, because I will try to address a glimpse of work unfinished in the language I'm not fluent enough, based on the work that is not translated to English very well, and I believe it cannot be translated into English very well. So please be a bit merciful from my, what I see now a clear failure. We will start with the anecdote, not a very serious one, and the event was very minor, but I believe it was symptomatic. A few days ago, Mr. Zach Gage from Polygon shared his opinion that there is a tasteless aspect of Shadow of Mordor game when you employ the mechanics of stealth killing to kiss your wife. He argued that there is clear distinction between the ways we are killing our enemies and kissing our loved ones. And I believe he didn't mean that we usually do not kill our enemies in Western culture, at least not in real life. I believe he was not only wrong, but this symptomatic example shows us the broader problem of mainstream, non-academic but ambitious video criticism that emphasizes the games that treats violence very seriously, calling them mature, and prizes those games that treat violence and distraction as a tool to, I don't know, teaching the dangers of such. This is very similar to the Enlightenment criticism of work of François Rabelais that Bakhtin in his seminal work of Rabelais shows, especially to the criticism delivered by Voltaire, who treats Rabelais as drunk philosopher, writing only when inebriated and in that matter utterly tasteless. Leaving the matter of taste outside, I believe there is a very important room for showing those EEE games we see as tasteless, sexist, and full of violence some love. This is what I am trying to do today. But to explain myself clearly, I have to share with you my firm opinion that video games as such are rooted in the culture of laughter, the very strong but silent from the position's privileged point of view undercurrent of Western cultures that was, of course, very mainstream in Renaissance, but it's with us still. There are several points to connect video games to the culture of laughter. I have no time to tell you about all of them. There is, of course, the argumentation of games being leisure activity, of something you do for fun. There is, of course, the case of folk roots of video games, and by folk I of course mean student culture of United States, not the folk as such. But the most important part, I believe, is that video games mechanics are very often, maybe always, parodist in nature. They exaggerate parts of the recognizable world to the very extent, and made connections between them. This is the only way you can play the game and to recognize the rules. So the world in all its diversity is reduced and parodied in a mechanism of playing. And that is my main, but not only, argument. And of course, if we are talking about culture of laughter, we need to remember about ambivalence of such. In all carnivalesque forms, as Bakhtin argues, there is both joy and distraction in the act of laughing. There is this vital part of laughter when you are laughing from your belly and you are full of joy, but you always laugh at the things that are sacrilegious, that destroys established serious hierarchies outside of the carnival. And in that case, there is, of course, this anti-establishment imaginary in video games, when you always fight against agents of hierarchies with a power figure that is called the boss at the end of the level. And there is, of course, the seriousness of academia, at which I believe the criticism laughter of video games is aimed. They see, we may not like it, but I believe games see us as are the enemies, as art critics and so on. I believe Gamergate shows us this very well. When we are talking about carnivalesque, we have to remember that all carnivalesque is temporal, because the carnival itself points out the critical point in time. And its role is to resolve the crisis by destroying oppressive hierarchies of seriousness and reconnect everything separated and reroute our material being in the material world. The artistic mean to do so in artistic forms, in the carnivalesque discourse, not in carnival activity, is the grotesque realism, which is opposed to classical realism because it tries to combine contradictory things and capture the temporal character of the reality. This is something classical realism cannot do because it sees world as finished, as ready. As was well observed, there is an important part of temporality in video games, not only because the game synchronizes the timeline of playing with timeline of living. So the player sees the activities in games as happening now, but also in the fact that which was very often emphasized, each gameplay is unique. So each is rooted in very unique moment in time. And that's why I believe the grotesque realism is very constitutive aesthetics of video games. And that's why, for example, AAA games cares very much to present an environment very realistic, and yet it presents human body as grotesque one, with all those muscles and so on. This is because in the very heart of the grotesque realism is human body. And the human body is something very engaged in video games in very many ways. For example, in many games there is a human body image in the center of the screen. And you are looking on it when you are playing all the time. And changes in this image, for example, changing clothes of our avatar, is very important and very vital part of gaming experience. You can visit any site that offers modes for mainstream video games, like, for example, the Nexus, and you can find very many different outfits for the characters. Therefore, I believe it is important. Then, there is this try to connect human body of the player, with the body of the avatar. It is done, of course, because video games are very bodily experience. You use your body to manipulate the avatar. And of course, because sometimes you are put in the place of the avatar in first-person perspective games. And then there is this holy grail of modern video gaming, to engage whole the body of the player in the game. In that way, the double-bodied entity is born, something very common to the carnivalesque imaginary, as Bakhtin argued. And then there is killing and destruction. There is the killing and fighting is the most basic ways you can touch others in the video games. You exert the body of the avatar to combine it with the body of your enemy, and then this body is more often than not mutilated, ripped apart, and then you eat it and become stronger. You get experience points or something like that. You can also see this moment as equivalent of sexual intercourse, because you copulate with the body of your enemy and you conceive the loot. Those excessive things, they are dropped from the ripped apart body of your enemy, and you collect them for nothing, because as you probably know, most of the loot is completely irrelevant. But there is culture of excess, rooted in the moment of bodies colliding. And this part, I am afraid I have to skip. In this grotesque reality world, there is a category of entities back in called jolly monsters. They are agents of real-world power, reduced by laughter to the pathetic beings you are destroying, you are killing with your laughter, to ease the fear of power, which is cosmic. When the power disappears, there is only you and the material world in the joy of living. And this joy of living is such important because it reminds you that you are immortal, that your single body will be ripped apart and eaten by maggots, but from your body, more bodies will grow. Like the grain tossed to the soil will produce more grain. And of course, in video games, we are experiencing the experience that body of the avatar is multiplied or immortal. You can try multiple times to avoid death, or you can use your many lives to beat the game and to destroy those jolly monsters that stand your way, that present themselves as very dangerous and very terrifying. But in reality, they are quite easy to destroy, to prevail. And from the ashes of the world destroyed in that matter, new hierarchy and new seriousness can be born, because the world is renewed and freed from fear. And of course, these revolutionary things, rooted in the aesthetics of video games, has to be put at ease but outside mainstream discourse. One of these tactics is to reduce the importance of destruction and violence in video games by calling it tasteless and immature. But also there is this very common tactics of employing post-romantic grotesque that transforms all that is jolly into fearing. And creating a grotesque world that is terrifying and hiding revolutionary potential of destruction as an act of self-defense. And this imaginary you, of course, know very well. Last thing I have to address is, of course, the other kinds of carnival excess. Those of you who know your Bakhtin, remember that the killing is not, and destroying is not only way to experience the carnival. You have also eat, you have also excelled, you have also to fornicate. And all those more rooted in body actions are much more hard to transfer to visual media and much heavily censored in Western culture. You cannot show residue in mainstream video game, but of course you can show residue in indie game like in Binding of Isaac. And there is also this very well-established genre of eating, you know, all those platformers games when you have to collect all the coins or something like that. And of course there is this ultimate game of eating called Pac-Man. Thank you kindly.